pounding so hard, I thought for sure he'd hear that and finish me off. But that's when I got really lucky, because he reached down and grabbed me by the shirt where it was soaked in blood. My lifeless act and the blood on my shirt seemed to fool him, because he just kind of let me go and ran to the wagon where the rest of them are throwing things out, pots, pans, papers, clothes, looking for money. Well, they didn't find very much money. They did take our cameras, our tape recorders, our radio, and everything of value. Once the bandits had what they wanted, they were gone. The bandits were gone. I crawled right over to my brother John. And I can tell you, I checked his pulse many times, listened for a heartbeat, but John was dead. And I felt so sad, so bad, so mad all at one time, I really did go into shock. And all of a sudden I came out of it and I realized something. John was dead. There's nothing I could do about that, but I was bleeding, I was wounded, I was in pain, and I didn't want to die. I better do something. I better get stubborn. You know, sometimes it's good to get stubborn. And I decided that I was going to live. I'd go over to the edge of the road, make up my mind I'm going to live no matter what, put pressure on my wound to stop the bleeding, and if I stayed awake until the sun came up, everything would be okay, because then somebody would come and help me. Although I knew nobody would help me that night, because it's bandit country and most people are afraid to travel that road. So I spent a long, long night. During that night, memories came back of earlier parts of the walk. One thing that came to mind was what my brother John told me many times. He said, "Dave, I love walking around the world. It's a great adventure and I love it. If I die walking around the world, you tell Mom and Dad I died happy." And I felt the same way. So at least I know my brother John died doing something he loved to do, and he died without any pain, died instantly. But me, I was in pain, and finally, though, when the sun was coming up, some soldiers came along, and those soldiers did help me. And later on, they caught 3 of those bandits and put their pictures in the Afghan newspaper. The other 3 bandits escaped into the Khyber Pass of Pakistan and got away scot-free. I was taken back to the American Embassy, to Dr. Meady, and under Dr. Meady, the American doctor's care, for about 20 days. And of course, I was pretty lucky. The bullet hit me about right here, just missed my heart, came out over here. And Dr. Meady told me about the 18th day, he said, when you get out of this American dispensary hospital, do not stay in this country. Too many germs, bacteria, and viruses. You better go home. And so he said, you won't be doing any world walking for at least 3, maybe 4 months. So I did. I flew back to Minnesota. I had something in mind. Once I got back to Minnesota, I called my brother Pete in California, and I said, "Well, Pete, are you going to help me?" He said, "Just as soon as you're ready to go, I'm taking John's place." So 4 months later, with my brother Peter, we went back to Afghanistan with the help of the American Embassy. We got Willie Macon, our wagon, back to the exact spot where the wagon was the night the bandits attacked us in Afghanistan, and we continued our walk the rest of the way around the world. Of course, this time we had quite a few policemen with us. And then just before we got out of Afghanistan, the highest high priest of Afghanistan came from Kabul, about 150 miles, and he wanted to meet the 2 Americans who were walking around the world. He was fascinated by the fact that we actually came back after our brother had been killed in his country. And so he met up with us, gave us his blessing, gave us 2 big Muslim rings, and said goodbye, and then we were on our way into a very exotic walk, the Khyber Pass of Pakistan. As a matter of fact, this is a little bit better picture of my brother Peter right there in the yellow hat who took my brother John's place. They said that we could not walk the Khyber Pass. They weren't going to allow it. It's only about 30 miles, and they said, "Hey, you guys can bus it, you can drive it, whatever, but you can't walk it because it's outlawed. It's closed at night. It's only open during the daytime to international traffic, trucks, cars, and buses. Nobody's allowed to walk it." And that's because of an agreement between the tribesmen and the Pakistani government, because although it's in Pakistan, it's controlled by the Khyber Pass. But hey, we couldn't even skip 30 miles, or we couldn't say we walked every step around the world. So we contacted the American Embassy in Islamabad, they contacted the Pakistani government, they contacted the tribal chiefs, and finally, they gave us special permission that we could walk through the famous Khyber Pass of Pakistan. But we had to agree to one thing. Now there's my brother Peter in the yellow hat right there, and standing behind him is a Pakistani prince, who was a good friend of the American Consul General in Peshawar, Mr. Belletri. And he agreed, the prince here, to walk with us. He would be a symbol to all the tribesmen up in the hills with rifles, that nobody better lay a finger on us or else heads are going to roll. So we made it to the famous Khyber Pass. And right in this particular picture, the prince was pointing out to us these monuments right here. He said this was an area where back in the 1800s, thousands of British soldiers were slaughtered by the tribesmen in the Khyber Pass. And the British Army left those monuments as a tribute to its fallen army. So then and today, it's a dangerous place. Although the road is open, and most of the time international travelers in cars, trucks, or buses are not bothered at all. Just stay within 50 feet of the road, and nobody is allowed to walk. Then we headed into Peshawar. And it was the prince who walked with us down into the marketplace here. He said it's a very, very dangerous marketplace. He said a lot of people don't like foreigners in this marketplace. A lot of international intrigue, CIA, KGB, and what have you. But it was a fascinating place. Of course, you can see the women again were wearing the shadri, covering up from head to toe. And then we headed into the capital city of Islamabad. And and the prince took a picture of my brother Peter and I and Willie and Drifter. Of course, my Drifter's in a wagon there. Right in front of the National Assembly building of Pakistan in Islamabad. And he also took us into the old capital city of Rawalpindi. We're down in the marketplace there. We found the streets were dirt. The ladies were carrying their groceries on their head. And the meat was hanging outside there with flies all over it in the hot sunshine. So that didn't look too appetizing to spoiled Americans. Finally, though, our friend the prince, he had to head back to Peshawar. And Peter and I and Willie and Drifter, we headed down on the road and we made it to a place called Lahore, Pakistan. And there the tourist bureau was absolutely fabulous. The Pakistani Boy Scouts came out to meet us, and we had a terrific time in Lahore, Pakistan. But then we had one final exotic country to walk before the Indian Ocean. India, where we found men on elephants. And I have to tell you, Willie would get excited. Her ears would go up in the air, she'd start stomping and snorting. Probably thought we were going to trade for an elephant or something. But she definitely would get excited when we meet men on elephants in India. When we got to Amritsar, we found the famous Golden Temple of the Sikhs. I mean, we were fascinated by this place. We definitely wanted to go see it, and of course we did. That's my brother Peter, that's me, Dave. But we had to leave Willie and Drifter in our wagon outside the walls, take off our shoes and socks, walk through a little ditch of water to cleanse our feet, and then they allowed us in to see the Golden Temple of the Sikhs. And of course, it was a fascinating place, a very calm, peaceful place. Today, things might be a little different, because after we finished walking around the world, there was some trouble in this area here when militant Sikhs took refuge in the Golden Temple, and the Indian Army went in after them. People were killed. So who knows? Maybe today they changed the name from the Golden Temple to the Bloody Temple in Amritsar, India. Walking across India, village after Hindu village, and kids, hey mister, hey mister, hey mister, all the time. We did have a bit of a problem because most of these kids could only say, hey mister, hello, goodbye, thank you, and please. And that was more than we could say in their language. But as soon as we get off the camera, like Pete did in this case, the kids would come running, and we get pictures of Hindu kids, Hindu villages, sometimes even with monkeys on the village walls. And up in the background there, of course, is the church, a Hindu temple in India. It was in India where we saw poverty, and I mean real poverty. I'd seen poverty in the USA, of course, and across Europe, of course. But in India, I mean, it just kind of slaps you in the face. Across Bihar State, I mean, take a look. There's a little boy right there, his little sister, starving kids in India, living in shacks like that. And I mean, you have to just wonder when you can have 3 wonderful meals and snacks in between in the good old USA, and here these kids are going to be lucky. They probably didn't have breakfast today. They probably didn't have lunch. They probably won't have dinner. Maybe if they get real lucky tomorrow, they might have one single bowl of rice and water, and that's it. Starving kids in India. Of course, I know what you're thinking. What about that cow right there? I mean, if they're starving, why couldn't eat the cow? I thought the same thing. But you see, in India, most people, about 85%, are Hindus. And in Hindu religion, cows are sacred. You must not eat a sacred cow. Now, you know, when I got to Allahabad, India, I met an educated and fluent Indian, and he spoke English, of course, and we got talking a little bit, and I said, hey, let me tell you something. I mean, if I'm starving, sacred cow or not, religion or not, the cow dies and I live. I'm going to have hamburger. He got very serious with me, and I must say that he emphasized the word most. He did not say all. He looked me in the eye and he said, you know that most Hindus would rather eat their own mother than a sacred cow? Well, he got his point across. And of course, in India, Willie got sick. And I say, of course, because that was the only country Willie got sick. She walked across Portugal, Spain, France, Italy, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, no problem. We got to India, and I mean, Willie got very skinny. Little dark picture here, but Willie got very skinny and slowed way down. We knew something was wrong. We didn't know what to do. And finally, in a village, we found a veterinarian, Indian animal doctor, who spoke a little bit of English. He looked over our big mule Willie, he kind of smiled, showed his teeth, and he said, food in my country in India very bad for mules and horses. Dirt, stones, who knows what else, your mule has worms. But I fix. You leave Willie with me, everything okay. So we took a rest. Why not? Rest our feet. Took off a week. We got back. Willie was fine. The worms were gone. You might say that man right there and his friends there helped us across their country, India. So people are still helping us make it around the world. And we did see some people in India. I mean, take a look. You ever seen so many people in your life? I mean, there are a lot of people in that country. It's only about a third the size of the United States. And we only have about 220 million people. They have 850 million people. Although you don't see people like this all over India. This was a very special place. The holy city of Banarsi, where the sacred Ganges River runs through. And a holy man had died, and all the villagers gathered into the holy city. I mean, there were so many people there, people everywhere, that we didn't have a place to walk. So, what did we do? Well, we just parked our mule and wagon. We went walking through the crowds, and we got down to the sacred river, and we found out that they were taking the holy man's body down to the river. Because the Hindus believe they get the body down to the sacred river, they build a big fire, and then put the body into the fire, and later on get the ashes and sprinkle them into the sacred river. The soul is set free. And I mean, it was fascinating. There were people everywhere, thousands of people. And then, can you believe it, in India, monsoon season, I mean, it rained and rained and rained, sometimes so hard I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Well, you can see right here I'm walking in mud. Yes, indeed. I know what you're thinking, though. Well, why didn't you walk on the road? Well, you're right. You know, there was a road all the way across India. It was built by the English back in the 1800s. It's called the Grand Trunk Road, and it's a fine, solid road, but in some areas it's very, very narrow. And during the rainy season, the trucks and buses were bumper to bumper. They wouldn't allow us to walk on the road. We were too slow. We had to walk in the mud like the rickshaws. And I'm telling you, it wasn't much fun, but we didn't give up. Even though we could only make 5-10 miles a day, we kept right on trucking along, and we made it all the way to Calcutta, India, on the shores of the Indian Ocean. And we did it. We walked from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. Calcutta is one of the worst cities I visited on the whole world walk. I mean, nobody knows how many people live in that city. 10 million, 15 million, 20 million. I mean, you have to feel sorry for the poor masses that live in Calcutta, India. We didn't like it very much, and we were staying with the Americans. But you know, if you walk the streets in the early morning hours, you find that people have been sleeping in the streets and the gutters and the sidewalks and the doorways. You find a dead body laying there, died of starvation overnight, dead body lying there, died of disease. You really have to feel sorry for those poor people, and we didn't like the place very much at all. They used to call it the Black Hole of Calcutta back in the days of World War II. But then, we did have to say goodbye to Willie Megan, and we had to say goodbye to our dog Drifter. And we felt very sad about that, because we loved that big mule that walked with us all the way 8,000 miles, 2 years from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. But you see, you cannot take animals to Australia. They won't allow it. They haven't got any hoof and mouth disease and rabies, and they will not allow it. So we spent quite a bit of time in Calcutta, India, until we found some very nice homes for our two wonderful animals, Willie and Drifter. At the Teleganj Racing Stables in Calcutta, some English people who had horses said they'd take good care of Willie for the rest of her life. At the American Council of Generals, we found an American lady there who loved animals, and she said she wanted to take care of Drifter. So we said goodbye to Willie and Drifter, packed up our Turkish wagon with the help of an Indian customs man, because of course we would need that Turkish wagon in the desert country of Australia, put the wagon on a ship, waved goodbye to our friends in India, and headed across the Indian Ocean down under to Australia, Western Australia. And the Australians, they were wonderful. They came through with an Australian mule we called Willie Megan too. And you notice the water on that Turkish wagon? Well, I'll tell you something. We did need that wagon because we were in Western Australia, and from Perth, Western Australia, heading across eastern country, we had to cross the Nullarbor Plain. We were going across over 1,000 miles of desert country, and it was January. You know what that means down under Southern Hemisphere? Summertime. And 1,000 miles, there's nothing in between. I'm telling you, we needed plenty of water. And then not only that, we headed out into the desert country of Australia, and we found it was the fly season. Those little specks right there are flies. We're attacked by flies. Well, they didn't bite us. They're after water and moisture. It's so hot, dry, and dusty. They try to get in your mouth, your nose, your eyes, your ears. We even had to put those strings on Willie's face so she could shake her head like that to keep the flies out of her eyes. And not only that, you know, if you get walking across, well, you maybe not walk across Australia, but if you get to Australia sometime during the fly season, find the Australians going like this.